The summer I turned 13, my parents decided to send me to Grandma Ella's place. She lived in a decaying Victorian home surrounded by tall pines and an ancient wrought iron fence, which creaked ominously whenever the wind blew. Their decision was due to a new job opportunity abroad, and they thought it would be a good idea for me to get to know Grandma better. I had only seen pictures of her, an elderly woman with a frail frame, thick glasses, and white hair that cascaded like a frozen waterfall. In those pictures, she was always smiling, her eyes reflecting the kind of warmth only grandmothers can offer. The bus ride was long, and by the time it dropped me off at the entrance of her property, the sky was painted with twilight's orange and purple hues. Carrying my backpack, I walked the cobblestone path leading to the house. That's when I saw her, standing on the porch, silhouetted by the dim light coming from inside. "Henry!" she exclaimed as she descended the steps and wrapped me in a hug. Her embrace was surprisingly strong for someone of her age. "Look how much you've grown." We went inside, and she offered me homemade cookies and milk. We talked about mundane things: school, my parents, and her garden. She seemed perfectly ordinary. That night, I was jolted awake by a sound. Thunk, thunk, thunk. It was rhythmic and seemed to be coming from downstairs. Curiosity getting the better of me, I tiptoed to the staircase. At the bottom, the back door was ajar, and I could see Grandma Ella, or who I thought was her, heading into the woods, a shovel in her hand. I rushed to my room, heart pounding. I reminded myself it could be a senile moment, or maybe she was just gardening, at night, alone. The next morning, she prepared breakfast. Everything seemed normal until I saw a smear of dirt on her cheek. "Late gardening?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She looked up, surprised. "Oh, just a little project. I hope I didn't disturb your sleep." Days turned into weeks. I began noticing strange behaviors. Grandma Ella would sometimes stare blankly at the woods, her expression distant and unreadable. One evening, I found her in the garden, whispering to the plants in a language I couldn't understand. One day, while she was out, my curiosity led me to the basement. The air was damp and smelled of old paper and mold. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed photographs scattered across a table. They were of children, none of whom I recognized, and each picture was labeled with a year. The dates ranged from the early 1900s to recent times. As I picked up a particularly old photograph, something else caught my eye. A diary, bound in cracked leather. I opened it, and what I read sent chills down my spine. Day 1. The body has been acquired. The spirit is restless, but will be contained. The ritual will begin at midnight. The subsequent entries detailed the ritualistic processes that she used to move her spirit from one body to the next, ensuring she never truly aged or died. A rustling noise snapped me back to reality. Grandma was returning. I hastily put everything back and sprinted upstairs, locking my bedroom door behind me. That night, the thunking resumed. Armed with a flashlight, I decided to follow her. She led me deep into the woods until we reached a small clearing. In its center was a freshly dug grave, but what truly horrified me was the sight next to it. My real Grandma Ella, bound and gagged, fear evident in her eyes. The imposter, sensing my presence, turned. Her eyes were not the warm ones I had known, but pitch black. She spoke in a voice that seemed to come from the depths of hell. "You shouldn't have followed me." Realizing I was in danger, I made a run for it. The woods became a maze, the trees reaching for me, the wind whispering threats. Behind me, the imposter's chants echoed, her voice growing louder and more desperate. I tripped over a root and fell, my flashlight shattering. In the darkness, I felt something cold wrap around my ankle. It began dragging me back to the clearing. Desperation kicked in. Using all my strength, I managed to free myself and continued running. Breaking through the woods, I found myself on a road. A car approached, and I flagged it down. It was a local deputy. After hearing my story, he radioed for backup, and we made our way back to the clearing. But it was empty. Both Grandma Ellis were gone. The only evidence of the night's events was the shallow grave. The deputy took me to the station, where my parents were contacted. They returned immediately, and our reunions were filled with tears and relief. The house was searched, but the imposter was never found. Years passed, but the trauma remained. I went to therapy, moved to a new city, and tried to forget. But every night, the events replayed in my nightmares. Then, one evening, as I was coming home, I found an envelope on my doorstep. Inside was a photograph of a boy, labeled with the current year. On its back, a message in a familiar, cursive handwriting. "You can run, Henry, but you can't hide. You're next." The terror was clear. Grandma Ella, or whatever she had become, was still out there, and she was coming for me. I immediately contacted the police, but they could find no fingerprints or trace of who might have left the photograph. To make matters worse, the boy in the photo was unidentified. With no immediate leads, the police advised me to install security systems and stay vigilant. I moved again, this time to a high-rise apartment in the heart of the city, hoping the dense population would serve as a barrier. Days turned into months, and while I tried to rebuild my life, the anxiety remained. One evening, as I was returning home from work, I ran into an old woman in the elevator. She looked frail with white hair cascading down her back, just like Grandma Ella's. I kept my eyes on the floor, but I could feel her gaze on me. The elevator seemed to take an eternity to reach my floor. When the doors finally opened, I practically sprinted out. That night, I received a call from an unknown number. Tentatively, I answered. All I heard on the other end was a soft lullaby, the same one Grandma Ella used to sing. My heart raced. I hung up, but the calls kept coming, each one playing the same eerie tune. Determined to end this, I decided to seek out the origins of the ritual. My search led me to a rare bookstore that dealt with occult literature. There, I found an ancient tome that described the spirit transferring ritual. It also mentioned a counter ritual that could potentially trap the spirit forever. With the knowledge in hand, I started preparing. I gathered all the necessary ingredients and set the date for the next full moon, which, according to the tome, was the most potent time to perform the counter ritual. The night arrived. I began chanting the verses from the book, placing the ingredients in a specific pattern. Hours seemed to pass, and just as I was about to complete the ritual, the lights went out. The only illumination was the soft glow of the candles I'd set up. Then, in their dim light, I saw her, standing by the door, the imposter with those pitch-black eyes. She lunged at me, but I continued chanting, louder and with more force. With every verse, she seemed to weaken, her form shimmering. Then, as I recited the final words, a blinding light filled the room, forcing me to shield my eyes. When it faded, she was gone. I'd like to believe that I trapped her spirit that night, but there were always whispers, stories of an old woman appearing in different parts of the world, hunting for her next victim. Years passed, and life returned to a semblance of normalcy, but I never truly felt safe. One day, while sorting through old family albums, I came across a photo of Grandma Ella. My heart skipped a beat when I noticed something. Beside her was a twin, another woman with the same features, the same cascading white hair. A note on the back of the photo read, "Ella and Alara, inseparable." I researched further and discovered a dark family secret. Grandma Ella had a twin sister, Alara, who had dabbled in dark arts. She was shunned and supposedly died young. But if the diary in the basement was to be believed, she had found a way to live on. The real terror hit me then. I had trapped one spirit that night, but there were two. Alara might be gone, but Ella, my real grandma, corrupted and turned evil by her twin's influence, was still out there. With the revelation about the twin sisters, my quest took on a new urgency. My research led me to the town's archives, where I delved into newspaper clippings and public records. The more I discovered, the clearer the picture became. Ella and Alara had been exceptionally close, but while Ella was the favorite, loved by all for her warmth and kindness, Alara grew jealous and bitter. Her obsession with the occult began as a way to rival her sister. But the dark arts consumed her, driving a wedge between the two. One particular clipping from the 1940s sent shivers down my spine. It reported the mysterious disappearance of 5 children over a span of months. The last child to go missing was seen near the woods, close to the Victorian house. The case went cold, but now I was beginning to piece together the grim puzzle. Convinced that the answer to stopping Grandma Ella lay in the past, I visited the old Victorian house once more. The property, now derelict and overgrown with vegetation, looked haunted. With each step, memories of that fateful summer came rushing back. In the basement, the photographs and diary were long gone, but a new clue awaited. Carved into the wooden beams were symbols, the same symbols from the occult book. Following them led to a hidden compartment in the wall. Inside, I found another diary. This one belonged to Grandma Ella. Her entries detailed her growing concern about Alara's descent into darkness. She wrote about her attempts to save her sister, culminating in a ritual to bind Alara's spirit to prevent her from harming anyone. However, the last entry was chilling. Ella had realized too late that Alara had turned the ritual against her. The two spirits had become entangled, forever doomed to hunt and transfer between bodies, their souls combined in a horrifying dance of darkness. With the diary in hand, I sought the assistance of a local expert in ancient rituals. Dr. Lorraine, a professor at a nearby university, examined the symbols and the diary. She believed that to break the cycle and free both spirits, we would need to perform a purification ritual on the grounds where the original binding had taken place. On the night of the next full moon, Dr. Lorraine and I stood in the clearing in the woods. Armed with the knowledge from both diaries, we began the purification ritual. The forest around us seemed to come alive, with shadows twisting and turning. Suddenly, 2 ethereal figures appeared before us. Grandma Ella and Alara, their spirits forever bound in a ghastly fusion. As the ritual reached its climax, the 2 figures began to separate, their forms distorting and writhing in pain. An otherworldly scream filled the night, and a strong gust of wind extinguished our candles. And then, silence. The spirits were gone. I returned to my life, forever changed by the events. The weight of the past and the terror of the encounters took a toll on me, but I was determined to move forward. Years later, on a cold winter night, as I sat by the fireplace in my home, There was a knock at the door. When I opened it, there stood a young woman, her eyes familiar and warm. "I've been searching for you," she whispered. "Thank you for freeing us." It was a spirit, but not malevolent. It was Grandma Ella, her soul now at peace. She smiled, and just like that, vanished into the cold night. The terror was finally over. The spirits were free, and the curse that had haunted my family for generations was finally broken.